Yeah, if you're just now joining, we're just taking a moment to introduce ourselves in the chat, your name, where you're joining us from, and two words that describe you today. Hi, Rachel. Heather from Seattle, authentic and driven. I love that. Curious and creative. All right, so as you're adding those in, we'll go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today, so thank you all for being here today. My name is Paola. I am Compass's communication manager, and I'm joining you today from Austin, Texas, which is the ancestral home of the Plains tribes, including the Lipan Apache, Comanche, and Tonkawa. I want to just take a moment to honor with gratitude both the land and the people who've cared for it since time immemorial. And I also want to invite you to learn more about the Indigenous caretakers of the lands and waters where you live and work at the link that we'll drop in the chat. So yeah, and for those who are new to our community, welcome. I want to briefly give you a brief overview of who we are. Compass is a science communication nonprofit. We believe that science plays an important role in helping us understand the environmental and social challenges that we face, as well as the options that we have to address them. So we work with science professionals from a range of disciplines and backgrounds, helping them share their work and build reciprocal and trusting relationships with people outside their field, including communities, policymakers, and journalists. And all this leads to more equitable access to science, more informed decisions, and more nuanced narrative of the issues. And a lot of our work is focused on capacity building. That includes workshops, coaching sessions, and events like this one, where science professionals can come and learn tools and strategies to really amplify their reach and impact. So if you've attended an event with us in the past, welcome back. It's great to see you again. Today's event may feel a little bit different than what you've seen from us previously. We will not be doing any breakout rooms or group exercises. So while we love to see your face, you're welcome to turn your camera off if you prefer. And we'll also be recording this event, and we'll be sharing the recording with all of you and other people in our community a few days after. So to just ensure the audio quality of the recording for those who can't attend live, we ask that you please remain on mute during the presentation. And if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to just drop them in the chat. And we'll try to get through as many of those as we can towards the end of the presentation. And after that, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question out loud if you prefer. But with that, I'd like to introduce you to my awesome colleague and Compass's Associate Director of Capacity Building, Meg Nakahara, who will be leading our training today. So off to you, Meg.
Thank you, Paula. It's wonderful to be here with all of you today. In case you haven't met me, my name is Meg Nakahara. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joining you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is the land of the Lenape people. And I am just really thrilled to get to do this event. Here is a secret for all of you that you may not know. It's that we've been kind of working on this curriculum, this material for a couple of months now. And so we're really excited to start to bring it to the folks that we work with and to really start trying it out. So if you've ever worked with us before, you're probably familiar with the message box, Compass's foundational tool for distilling what you know and why it matters for a specific audience. And we still love the message box. It's fantastic, but it's not the only tool that we use to craft meaningful communication. And in recent years, we've been feeling more and more like we need to have tools and resources for folks for all of the strategy parts of communication, all the things they really need to do before they roll up their sleeves and work on building those messages. So we're going to do something fun today and share that content that we've been developing. We call this event Before the Message because it truly is all of the things that we think are important to think about before you get to that message crafting. As fun as that is, there's really some background work that we want you to think about and to do before you dive in. So today, we are going to focus our time on better understanding why we want to communicate in the first place. What are our goals? Why are we spending time doing this? We're going to think through how people might receive the messages that we send, because what we send and what is received can often be different. We also want to consider the social and ethical implications of our communication plans and the audiences that we work with. And we're just generally going to work through all the things that we want you to do before you put words on paper, and give you a chance to maybe do a little practice on your own. So as Paula mentioned, this is being recorded. So if you are joining us in the future, hello, it's so good to have you here. You may want to watch the whole recording at once, which is obviously what the folks in the room will do, is just kind of sit through all of it. But you also may choose to pause the video and work through the material as you go, whatever works best for you. And the reason I'm suggesting pausing is because we made a workbook. We have something new to share with you that we want you to try out. So we have developed this workbook with all of the material that is featured in today's presentation in this event. So you all are actually the first external folks to see it. Very exciting. Paula is going to share it with all of the people who are at the live event afterward, because honestly, things like this can be really intimidating to just see and try to dive right into. And so we want a chance to kind of walk through it with you and give you a sense for what you can do with this tool. If you are joining us afterward, you can definitely take it in all at once, or maybe you want to pause the video and work through the different sections of the workbook as you go, whatever works best for you. This is also a great moment for me to say that this curriculum is a work in progress, and we are always trying to improve what we offer here at Compass. And so we obviously want to make it even better than it already is. And we welcome your feedback on this workbook or even on this event itself, and how we can make it more useful for your communication efforts. Because at the end of the day, we want it to be useful for all of you. So with that, let's dive right in. The workbook is organized into sections. So this is section 1. There are 6 sections total. And this is the very beginning. We're going to take a look at why we communicate in the first place. It's actually really funny how often folks don't think about why they are communicating, what they hope will happen because of it. And I consider it one of the most critical parts of successful communication. So let's talk about it. In fact, let's talk about goals. Goals are vital because without them, your communication cannot be strategic. And being strategic just really means that you have a thoughtful plan for how you want to accomplish something. But you've got to know where you're going to know if you've gotten there in the first place. And this is, of course, in the Compass way of doing things, backed up by research. And so researchers have asked themselves, how do you know that you are an effective communicator? And the answer is deceptively simple. It's when your communication helps you achieve your goals, right? And so if you have not set goals, it's hard for you to know if you're being a successful communicator. Another way to think about goals that might be easier, I know that the word goal can be tough. It can feel jargony. Maybe it's about shifting your mindset from what am I working on to what am I working toward? What do you hope to accomplish? What do you want to do? How will effective communication get you there? All right, so I'm going to move us into a real life example. I am an experiential learner. I think if you've done work with Compass, you know we like to have examples. So before we get into the goal setting part of section 1, I'm actually going to start by laying some groundwork, telling you a bit of a story, the context behind this example. So this story comes from my Compass colleague, Bob Crimian, who lives in Savannah, Georgia, and who happens to work on wildfire issues on our team. He also spends a lot of time engaging with the senior crowd in Savannah through a lot of different ways and through past jobs that he's had. So that's an audience that he's really familiar with. All right, so here's your background. You may not know this, but the southeastern US has an extensive history with wildfire. And the fire that they experience is very different from what you may be familiar with in the western US and Canada. Prescribed fire, or when fire is intentionally introduced to a landscape, has been used for ecological restoration and land management really across the globe since time immemorial. But human development and climate change impact how we interact with fire. Many folks, and in this instance, folks in Georgia, can experience poor air quality from wildfire smoke, even when it's prescribed fire, and that can impact their health. And although not everyone is aware, there are simple ways to find out, what is today's air quality and to take action to avoid inhaling too much smoke, which of course can make us sick. So with all of that in mind, that background, let's talk about a communication goal we might have for this situation. All right, so this is where the workbook really starts. Why? What is the reason you're communicating? What problem are you trying to address? What opportunity do you want to share? Again, I know this can feel overwhelming, but this is so, so crucial, and I really do want you to start here. You may put something down and start working through the rest of the workbook and say, you know what? That's not actually my goal. I think it's something different. That's great. Go back, change it. This tool and most other Compass tools are iterative by nature. And as we work through our plans, we really discover what's working and what's not. So don't be afraid to put something down and then know that you can come back and change it. So for our prescribed fire smoke in Georgia example, here is a goal. I want to increase the number of people who take protective action against smoke during prescribed fire events in Georgia. Let's see a couple notes on that. A lot of times when we talk about goals, people are like, well, my goal is to communicate because I have to legally, or my organization is making me. Not great. I would not use that as your goal. That is not going to be inspirational. It's not going to help you move to a place you want to be. So avoid that. Also, I would avoid saying my goal is to inform people. That I would say is like a base level goal. And I think we can do better than that. I think we can be more specific. And I think we can think about what we want to do with our audience to get there. And so if you're really stuck on thinking your goal is informing people or informing your audience, I will ask you to take a step back and think about, why is it important for you to inform your audience of this information? What do you hope that they do with it? What do you hope results from them having this knowledge? Also, a friendly reminder that just passing information on to people does not change people's minds or perceptions. As much as the deficit model feels really good, that communicating by just sharing more facts, it doesn't actually work. So let's do better because we know we can. The final thing I want to say about goals is the more specific you can be, the better. This is a relatively specific goal. And we say be more specific, both because it helps you do a better job. And honestly, it makes all of the activities we engage in so much easier. So really, you're doing yourself a favor by getting specific right out of the gate. All right, now that we've set our goals, let's talk about one of maybe Compass's favorite subjects, which is knowing our audience. So if you have ever attended a Compass workshop, you are familiar with this phrase. It is a cornerstone of our kind of communication belief system. We believe that human connection is really at the heart of change, and that we can be most successful when we build relationships with others. And part of that is understanding who they are, what they've experienced, and what matters to them. These are all things that we can gain by listening first and then having meaningful conversations with them. So let's take a step back and actually start to think about how we identify our audience. When we think back to our goal, you might be like, I have a very obvious audience, and that's fantastic. We love when that happens. However, I will encourage you to think about other possible audiences. It is rare that it's just one audience, one specific audience you want to communicate with. And by thinking about others, that's going to give you a chance to really do kind of a benefit cost analysis. Think about, who do you need to engage with about this? It might turn over new stones that you didn't think about before. So a bit more about audience. Forgive me if you've heard this before because you've worked with compass, but I think it's so important that I'm going to say it again. Often people say that their audience is the general public, and that is one of the few things that we just don't allow in our workshops, because the reality is that the general public is every single person on this planet. And there's very little that they have in common. And honestly, there's very few things that every person on this planet wants or needs to know. So how can we hone in and be more specific? And that specificity is going to help us move toward our goal. All right, so the clearer we can be about who we're trying to communicate with, the more we understand them, the easier it will be for us to connect in meaningful and relevant ways. And I can acknowledge that this feels really daunting, just to like approach this figuring out all of your audiences. But personally, what works well for me, I think it works well for a lot of folks, is to just do kind of a brainstorm, brain dump of all of the folks who may be involved or connected with our goal in whatever way. And that is really broad. And I think it can be really helpful to just kind of get it all out and go from there. So let's move on to the next part of the workbook. You'll notice there are 3 circles for audience groups. I'd love it if you had more than 3. There's plenty of space in the book, especially if you print it out. If you have, the more you can put here, the more you can really reflect on who you want to work with. So that's my secret recommendation. Now, let's think about our example of smoke in Georgia and think about some of our audiences. So these are some audiences I pre-brainstormed. So vulnerable residents, that's pretty broad, but those are certainly folks that we want to know about smoke and how to take protective action. Maybe medical professionals, because they see a lot of folks, especially maybe folks who are experiencing respiratory issues from smoke in the air, from poor air quality. And then maybe city officials, because the city probably has some kind of stake in public health and making sure that people, public health is generally good. And those are good, they're okay audiences, but I think we can do even better because we know more about our geography. We know more about the thing, which is wildfire smoke. So let's see if we can hone in. My next layer of specificity. Oh, I'm sorry. The general public will never be your audience. We promise. The next layer of specificity that we'll do is taking vulnerable residents and really honing in on children and seniors in Savannah. Are those all of the vulnerable populations? No. But it is a subset that we are choosing that we think are important to address. Under medical professionals, again, Savannah urgent care nurses and doctors are not all of the medical professionals in this region, but it is people who are maybe very likely to encounter folks who are experiencing health-related issues from smoke. And then not every city official is probably working on this subject, but who is, I bet, is health department communication staff. So those are all different folks that have some stake in this. They are involved in some way and who you may want to think about communicating with. I will even add that if you are able to get your audience down to an individual person, that can be great. I want to acknowledge the trade-off. The more specific you are, the easier it is for you to craft a plan, a communication plan, and messages that are super meaningful for just that one person. I'll also acknowledge that in our lives, we rarely get to communicate to just one person, right? We probably need to reach a broader audience with what we have to share. So that's a bit of a tricky balance, but it's something that you will have to experiment a little bit with. I just want to encourage you to think about maybe not being at either end of that spectrum, and is there a happy place in the middle? I'm also going to add in a secret additional layer that's going to come back later in this presentation. So I put in folks who are tangential, who are related to one of our audiences, children and seniors in Savannah. They are parents and teachers. Those folks are engaged with children. They, in a lot of ways, are kind of responsible for the health and well-being of children. And then senior center staff are often in close connection with seniors and may already kind of have this role of advice giving. And so those may be people we want to think about. I put this in here because while you're brainstorming, sometimes You might have these like oddball audiences that you think, I know they belong in here somewhere, but I don't know that I want them to be like my primary communication audience. This can be a way for you to like hold on to them and not forget them and think about how they can play a role down the road. So hitting pause on that, don't forget it. We will come back. Let's circle back to thinking about who is our audience. The next step after deciding that is how can you connect with them? So we have these great ideas about who we want to communicate with, but we also have to understand who these folks are, what matters to them, why they should care. That is extremely important and is a lot of your success is going to be contingent upon it. And that is because very often we think that messages are sent and received as the same thing. We think I say these words, they will be received, they will process and understand it, and we will come to the same exact understanding. But that's not actually how it works. Most commonly, I like to think of communication as a game of telephone, where your message will change as it passes through layers of our individual identities and experiences. So we need to acknowledge the importance both of the message we send and the meaning of the messages as they are received. These are two different things, and we need to be thoughtful about both of them. Another way that I like to think about message versus meaning is using the good old iceberg metaphor. As many of you know, icebergs, the majority of them is underwater, and there's just, the kind of the tippy top sticks out. And if you are to look at an iceberg just from above the water and say, I think I know the size of it, without knowing that fact, you would be mistaken, right? That's not correct. And so the same is true, I think, with messages. So you can think about them as kind of the tippy top of the iceberg. They're maybe the very clear, very obvious parts of communication, but there are all of these things under the water that we have to be aware of, and that also it behooves us to explore them and think about them and the layers of meaning that they will add. So there are a lot of different things. It could be things that come for you or things within your audience. So things like body language might be something that you bring to a conversation, but something like culture, lived experience, numeracy, and literacy, those are things that your audience is kind of bringing to the conversation. And then there are things that both of you bring to the conversation, things like your each individual risk perception or the situation you're coming from. You each have your own set of values and maybe carrying different kinds of trauma that will influence how you filter messages and really process them and receive them and think about them. So given all of that, I'm going to talk you through 3 things that I think make a huge difference. If you are like, Meg, this is great, I want to learn more about this section, have I got some good news for you. This is material that we cover in our Intro to Strategic Communication virtual event that you can sign up for online. It's also something that we do kind of for groups sharing this introduction to the message box. So this goes into much greater detail. We are doing a very quick flyby right now. So the first thing I want you to think about when it comes to understanding your audience and understanding how messages might have different meanings would be listening. Now, when I say listening, most people think I mean listening to respond. And this is kind of our default listening setting. We're like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to think about how I want to respond, whether I agree or disagree. And that kind of a superficial level does work for our communication. But if you want to really understand your audience, we want you to listen. We want you to try listening to understand. That is maybe listening where you are not prepared to respond, where you really take in and just consider what's being shared with you and really go deep with your audience on that. It is not about you sharing your story in the moment, how it connects with you or your feelings or perspectives. It's really about doing this very unselfish listening to understand who they are. The second thing you'll want to do is build trust. This is an extremely complex topic. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of research behind it. There's also a lot of kind of systemic challenges to trust in North America and beyond. It is, however, crucial. If you want to engage successfully with your audience, if you want them to make change in any way, you need to build trust. And that starts from your very first interaction. So luckily, listening is an aspect or can lead to trust building, among other things. There are additional things that can build trust. There's a citation here. And of course, come to our other workshop if you want to learn more. The third thing that I want you to think about to get to know your audience better would be to connect over shared values. So what's amazing about this is that once you listen to your audience and you build some trust, you can start to understand what values matter to them and what values matter to you. And there are so many values out there. You'll see on the next slide, I've actually cited some research about values that can maybe give you a common language to pull from when thinking about values. But at their essence, these are the things that people hold dear in life, the things that kind of help them navigate tough decisions. At the end of the day, it's like what we come home to and what matters most to us. I will say that with a very high level of certainty, almost any audience that you'll come across, you will have at least one shared value with them. So it's incumbent upon us to figure out what that is, but it definitely exists. And I'll share more in the next slide, actually. So presume that in this example, our wildfire or our prescribed fire in Georgia example, Bob has gone out and he has listened and engaged with the senior crowd in Georgia in a lot of different ways. So he's listened, he has built trust with them, and he has connected over shared values with them. That has enabled him to really understand them at a deeper level and sets him up well to do this part of the workbook. I actually really love this part. This is, I think it's my favorite part. And I say that because this is the piece where you cannot do it in a vacuum. You have to understand your audience. You have to connect with them if you want to be able to do this. And so keep that in mind. If this is something that you go to do and you're like, I'm really struggling to fill out any of these circles, that's just probably a good sign that you need to take a step back. Do you need to do some research about your audience? Is it something where they publish information online maybe, or there are news articles? Can you have a conversation with maybe a member of that broader audience? How can you learn more about them? Once you've done that work, you should be able to meaningfully fill out this infographic-y thing, this cool spiral, we'll call it that. So let's see what Bob came to found out about his audience. And we have decided, in case it wasn't clear, we have decided to focus on seniors in Savannah, Georgia, who happen to be more vulnerable to poor air quality, in this case from prescribed fire. So each of these kind of swirls has an aspect of your audience that you need to think about and understand. So the first one we'll talk about is concerns. What is concerning to them? What's scary? What are they thinking a lot about? You really need to understand this in order to meet them where they are and think about what's realistic for them to do. So some examples for this crowd might be other hazards. Fire smoke is not the only hazard that Savannah faces. Hurricanes are a very big thing. Coastal flooding is very big. Excessive heat is also a problem. All of these things, of course, being exacerbated by climate change. So yes, this is an important thing, but it's an important part of a bigger concern that they're dealing with. Also, seniors often are living on a limited income. So we need to be thoughtful about what kind of financial requests we might make of them. And then finally, loneliness. For a lot of seniors, they get connection by leaving their house, engaging with friends, doing activities, things that may be more dangerous to do if air quality is poor. But loneliness is a really big concern. And so you need to be able to address that. All right, let's move on to the next thing, which is cultural context. This is actually great that Bob lives in Savannah. So he already has some of this, but this is part of embedding yourself in a community and understanding what are some of the cultural aspects, things that people just do because that's how we do things around here. And knowing that can help you understand why folks may react in a certain way or how they might receive information. So let's talk about these aspects. One of my favorites that Bob told me is this idea of Savannah slow or Slovana, which I love. It's the idea that the pace is just slower in this city. So you cannot expect people to immediately jump up and go quickly do a thing. It's just culturally a bit slower in how people take action and how they move about in the world. There's also a strong sense of Southern hospitality and kindness and welcoming that's important. There can often be this sense that like our fire is different. For a lot of us who see coverage primarily of Western US and Western Canada fire, it's a very specific kind of fire. It has very specific concerns that a lot of us may know about, but fire in the Southeast US is different. It's very different. And so, the cultural context, maybe we know our fire, we've lived with it. It's just different. We just do it different. Another aspect is a city versus rural divide. Maybe you are trying to reach seniors who are just in the city itself, but what about folks who kind of live on the edge or folks who live in more rural areas but may come in? These are all things that you need to think about. Is that something that divides people and that you need to be able to speak to two different aspects of kind of where folks live? All right, up next is values. Remember, we talked about that a couple slides ago. These are our audience's priorities. This is what really matters to them. Now, I actually feel like there's a lot more than 4 that matter to this audience, but here are 4 that we think are particularly relevant. What I will note is that concern for friends and family is an extremely, I don't want to say universal value, but it's about as close, I think, to universal value as you're going to get. Most people can connect on a really deep, meaningful level about the concern and care that I want for their family members, taking care of future generations. That matters to so many people. So when in doubt, that could be a great place to start. Other values that seniors in Savannah often hold are things like protection of nature. There is kind of a strong conservation bend to folks that live there because they are surrounded by, very beautiful wilderness and even in the city itself, and folks come in and are tourists often to see that beauty. They have a value of pleasure, and I put this in because very often we think the value of pleasure or enjoyment is somehow bad, and it's not. And so this is part of my goal, is to convince you that pleasure is a wonderful thing. It is a joy of being a human. They value pleasure. They value taking walks at sunset and seeing a beautiful sunset that is maybe so beautiful because of poor air quality. They value having a good time, laughing, having maybe a meal outside. These are all really pleasurable human experiences. And it's wonderful that it's a value that they hold. And we want to respect and honor that. And then finally, independence. I joke with a lot of groups that I work with that this is, the very American value. Of course, not universally and not just America, but this idea of making decisions for yourself. And I think that is especially can be held strongly by seniors when they don't want people stepping in to make decisions for them before maybe they have to. All right. And the final thing we want to talk about is aspirations. I really love thinking about aspirations because I think that the most successful communication involves painting a picture of what could be a beautiful future that everyone wants to work toward. That's extremely compelling, much more compelling in a lot of ways than look at this really awful thing that could happen. So here are some aspirations. Community resilience. I think that's actually in a lot of communities is something that people aspire to. They want to be good people, and that can take a lot of different forms. It could mean not overwhelming the local health system. It can mean being, part of a cooperative group of folks who live in this community. It can come across as a lot of different ways. People aspire to have clean air. I would also add clean water. I would say just like a healthy environment and a beautiful environment matters a lot to people, but in this instance, especially clean air is important. And then finally, connection. I would say this is the opposite or kind of the flip side of loneliness. People aspire to have connection. This is actually just a human thing. We all desire connection with each other. And so, yes, to the extent that what we share, the information we share, what we hope they do can lead to greater connection, that is a beautiful thing. All right, that was a lot of information about our audience. I hope that by going through this really specific example and telling you a little bit of story behind it, I was able to help you think through how you might do this for the audiences that you're thinking about, and also give you a sense of really the depth of knowledge that we hope that you can gain when it comes to preparing to communicate with an audience. All right, we are going to move on to section 3. And that is building a shared vision. This is another thing that we really value at Compass and is really going to help you think about how do we move forward, right? Actually, the next slide that I have says, what will we accomplish together? We find that communication is much more successful when it is approached from that angle than you need to do this, or I'm informing you of this, do whatever you want. That does not inspire people to trust or to take action or do anything. So let's frame this as what can we do together? This is what the space in the workbook looks like. So what role do you envision your audience playing? What action do you maybe hope that they might take as a result of the communication? In this place, fully acknowledging that we cannot force our audience to do anything. We have a strong respect for personal agency, and people have a freedom to do what they're going to do. But here are some things that would probably help them take protective action against smoke. And they include things like regularly checking air quality info. That's a pretty simple step. And knowing that when air quality is poor, we're just going to limit outdoor activities. And I purposefully here did not say that like when air quality is poor, do not go outside, because that's also not very realistic. We have to be thoughtful about what our audience will actually do and what they can achieve. And so when air quality is poor, it would be great if they were to limit outdoor activities and not do as many. That's a step in the right direction. And then finally, know what are the health signs of smoke exposure and seek medical care if they are present. This is another important thing because especially for seniors, if they develop respiratory issues, for example, those can snowball into other things. And so knowing when they may have maybe experiencing some distress from smoke inhalation, knowing how to quickly and easily access medical care really matters. A couple additional notes, pro tips. You really do need to think about whether your audience can actually do this. And I would ask yourself about really these like 4 things that I have in here. Do they have the authority to do this? Or do they have the jurisdiction to do this? Super important. If they can't be in charge of this, it doesn't make a lot of sense to ask them to do it. Do they have the money? Or resources. Resources can be time, they can be energy, they can be physical things that they might need, an air filter, for example. Do they have these things and can they have access to them? Are these realistic ideas that you're putting out there? I also think it's important that they should be an active participant, both in doing the thing, but also thinking through once you've kind of begun your communication and are engaging with folks, they should be an active participant in saying, this makes sense for me, or this doesn't make sense for me, and that we need to listen to them and understand where they're coming from. This is all leading to this important point that I really want to make, and that is thinking about why people may not act and why they may not take the actions that we think are a good idea. So I'm going to share some research that I really do love, and I'm gonna as we say at Compass, I'm going to yes and this research. So I have added a little carrot here with a line. So people may often fail to act, not because they do not have enough information. We talked about this earlier. It's not that they don't have enough info. They fail to act because they don't know why they should care, and or they don't know what to do. That for a lot of folks is the case. It's not about information, it's about helping them understand what their options are and why it matters to them. That being said, I'm going to put like a really big and here. That is not the whole story. And that it's not realistic of us to tell people what they should do in a vacuum and think that, of course, they'll just do it if they can. It certainly does not acknowledge systemic injustices, systemic issues, personal agency, all of the things that actually do really matter a lot to us when it comes to having people make decisions. And so we have added this section into the workbook, and I hope that you do not feel that it is a throwaway section or like, I'll get to that, or maybe I do that. I believe that this is a crucial part of doing this, because when you fill this out, you may unearth important information, important perspectives that may completely change the rest of your communication plan. So this is really, really important. And I want to talk you through it, even though I do think this might be one of the more intimidating sections. So let's talk about, in the context of our example, what are some social, material, financial, and contextual history considerations? So, and these are just a couple, there are more than this, but I wanted to give you just an idea. So social things is that seniors are often highly respected members of the community. They have more lived experience, certainly, and they may be less willing to take advice. I don't know if you have engaged with seniors in your family or otherwise, but that can often be the case. That, I want to be clear, is not a good or a bad thing. We're not assigning value to this. We are just being realistic about the situation that's going on. So that is maybe a power dynamic. That is a specific way that relationships may exist already in this community. Materially and financially, again, this comes back to, can they actually do this thing? The good news is that many seniors are able to make decisions about going outdoors for themselves, although sometimes a caregiver may be involved. A lot of folks really do have that agency and ability. But I will say that many seniors live on a limited income. So be aware of any financial asks. If you're telling a senior that they should consult like the EPA Air Now app about AQI, the air quality index, be thoughtful. Do they have a smart device that can have that app on it? Because if they don't, that's not going to be really helpful advice. And in fact, we're not going to suggest that they go out and buy a smart device just for that, right? So be thoughtful about what kind of asks you might put on them. Also, just acknowledging that technology can be intimidating to a lot of folks as well. So is there another way that they can get this information? Can it be posted somewhere, or can it be something that comes up in another location? Something we will talk about in a little bit. But first, let's talk about contextual history. This is understanding what has gone on in this community, what folks have experienced. And one thing, certainly not the only, is that climate change has changed how we engage with fire. So the actions that seniors have taken for their entire lives may no longer be as safe. So ways that maybe they have dealt with smoke in the past may have been effective enough for the way that smoke was part of their lives. Maybe it's not as effective anymore. Or maybe it was never all that effective, but now we know better and we can do better. So let's think about that. We are possibly trying to have people, I don't want to say go against, but acknowledge that their lifetime of experience may not give them full information to make the decisions here. There may be other things to think about. I also love this point. This is in the workbook, and I put it in at the bottom because it's so important. Your audience is not like the victim of your communication, right? They are an active partner. So don't forget to consult with them. Do they envision themselves being able to play the roles that you suggested? Do they have an alternative vision for that? Do they have a different goal? I think this is one of the most crucial parts of communication, because we can make a lot of assumptions about what people need and how science is going to save them. And that can all be just incredibly wrong. We need to think about what does our audience need? Are there more pressing matters that they're trying to deal with? And so maybe smoke is not even on their radar because they're trying to deal with something else. Let's contextualize this with our audience. Let's think about what they envision for themselves and see if we can't help them move toward that. All right, so the next section, this is actually, I think, one of the more beautiful sections because I've kind of shared this with you, is what does success look like? I think we very often just skip over thinking about what like an amazing outcome or situation would be like. If our goal was achieved, what would it look like? So here is my success would be that Savannah, Georgia has a healthy, engaged community of seniors who know how to safely enjoy the outdoors. That's a beautiful community. That's a community I'd want to be in. Another way that I explain to folks, because it can feel a little intimidating, is can you paint a picture of a positive future? What would that look like if you were trying to sell it to someone to be like, look at this thing that we could achieve? What does that look like? How can you get that across to your audience? All right. Section 4, which we're moving on to now, is about charting our path forward. This has been a lot of thinking and strategizing, but we're moving closer, ever closer to actually thinking about our messages. And that means we need to think about how the messages are going to get into the hands of our audience. So this is really about how will the information reach them? How are you going to connect with them? Again, this is something that people like to put way earlier in this process, but I feel strongly that you cannot come to this step until you fully understand your audience, who they are, what they care about, where they go to get their information, who they trust. These are all things you need to know in order to make these selections. I find that by selecting these things too early or being like, oh, we have someone in the office who's really good at social media, so let's do social media, you might just totally miss the mark. And that's just a waste of scarce resources. And we don't want you to do that. So I firmly believe that it is worth the time and investment to think through which of these make the most sense for you to spend time, money, and energy on. So with that, I'm going to talk you through kind of two different ways of thinking about how we message. It's actually two things you need to think about. So it's going to be platforms and tactics. Let me tell you about platforms. From what you know of your audience, where are you most likely to reach them? Remember that they get their information from a variety of places and they have a varying level of trust in those places. So you want to make sure to use a platform that meets them where they are. Like I said, you may have someone in your office that's like really good at social media, but if the seniors of Savannah, Georgia are not hanging out on social media, or let's even say it's like TikTok. If the seniors of Savannah, Georgia are not on TikTok, and I would speculate that a lot of them are not, probably not a great place to spend your energy and resources. So let's think about some that I brainstormed with Bob. These are different places where seniors may get their information. So as simple as like meetings at a senior center, listening to the radio, WSVH 91.1 FM, Georgia Public Broadcasting. Maybe that's where they get information. Maybe they listen to it for years and years and trust it. Maybe it's interpretive signs at Forsyth Park, which is a famous park in Savannah, as I have learned. This is a personal experience, the seniors in my life really love interpretive signs. So maybe that's a great way to connect with them. I also wouldn't discount the importance of things like one-on-one meetings, especially meetings at places where these folks feel comfortable. So it is making a presumption that they hang out at local diners. I'd like to hang out at a local diner. It could be a coffee shop. It could be another place, but having these one-on-one conversations that are very casual can be really powerful. They can also set you up to understand who are the important players, who has a lot of trust in the community. You can learn a lot from them, both you can share information in them and you can learn a lot about your audience in them. Maybe you want to do an appearance on WTOC 11 Morning Break, which is a real TV talk show in Savannah. They have those bits all the time, those bit segments, right? Where you come in and talk about something. So that might be a thing that if it's on during the daytime, it's probably going to be people who are not at a job, people who are retired, probably seniors tuning in. And then other things like a newspaper article. A lot of folks read the newspaper, probably going to read that. And then maybe materials at a doctor's office, because that's already probably a pretty trusted place. And so information they receive there may be more likely to be trusted. All right, so those are the different places where you can connect with folks. Let's talk next about tactics. Tactics are how you are most likely to reach your audience. Remember that involved in tactics is things like cultural context, numeracy and literacy, risk perception. And so you want to make sure that you pick tactics that speak to that. So a quick example I'll give is that the difference between graphs and infographics, which may seem pretty similar. Think about your audience. Has your audience looked at a graph since high school? And have they been out of high school for a while? If so, maybe a graph just like isn't the best way to meet them and have them understand information you want to share. Maybe an infographic that perhaps doesn't even require much writing in order to understand it. That can really help people fully wrap their heads around what the information you're trying to get across. So you do need to make some of these tough decisions because you can't do everything. So here are some tactics that I think could make sense with these platforms. This is also fully acknowledging that there are a lot more we could pick. You may have a different opinion on this, and that's perfectly fine. So I won't walk through all of them. I will point out a couple of things that I think are really important. For your one-on-one meetings at local diners, I think stories and personal testimony are incredibly powerful. In fact, I think they're one of the most powerful tactics you can use in general. But having someone or a spokesperson, so maybe it is a senior from the community, speak about their experience, maybe having health impacts from poor air quality. Maybe it's telling stories about change that they've seen in the city over time, in Savannah over time. That can be extremely powerful. I will also say that you can do stories, personal testimony on the morning break appearance, as well as maybe some videos, which gives you a chance to maybe do some like on the ground gathering of video to share. I want to also point out, if you look through these, some of them are on the more expensive end, a resource expensive, time, money, energy. Interactive map, that's probably one of the more expensive things here. But you know what's actually relatively inexpensive is frequently asked questions. And that putting them together for nurses and doctors to share at a doctor's office or just to have kind of sitting out, those don't have to be that expensive. So you also want to think about what resources do you have to spend? What makes the most sense for you in this situation? Now, the workbook stops there. It looks different. It has a lot of different or additional suggestions for platforms and tactics. And you'll want to think through both. I'm going to add in another layer. I'm going to call this varsity level strategery. But I think it's really important. If you remember way back in the audience slide when we were brainstorming audiences, we had children and seniors in Savannah. And then we had 3 additional little audiences there of parents, teachers, and senior center staff. And I said, hold on to those. Those are tangential audiences. They are related to this, but they're maybe not the audience you plan that you want to get this information to. So with that in mind, let's talk about partners, because that's what they may be. You may decide ultimately that they are an audience, but maybe they are a partner that's going to help you connect information to your audience. So here are some partners that you could build relationships with as well, or connections for communication. So you'll notice senior center staff is in there. That came from that original slide. But there's also things that are pretty simple. Maybe it's fellow seniors, incredibly powerful to have communication coming from peers. Maybe it's a reporter from the local newspaper. Maybe it's nurses and doctors. This is, like I said, by no means all-encompassing. There are so many more things that are so many more partners, tactics, and platforms that you could think about here. But this kind of activity of brainstorming lets you think about a lot of possibilities, think about where you maybe already have the most information or connections, and maybe how much things will cost in time. Remember, time, money, and energy. So that you can make a strategic decision about what works for you. And then maybe you try a couple of these and you're like, you know what? It's not working the way we want it to. Maybe we need to go back and think about our goal. Sure, maybe we need to know more about our audience, but maybe we also just need to think about different ways of reaching them. Maybe what we thought was a way to reach the folks we really wanted to get to just wasn't right. So this gives us a chance to come back and revisit and rethink, because like I said before, tools at Compass are very iterative, this included. All right, let's scoot along. We are almost at the end. Let's do section 5. We call this the secret. I call this the secret, and that's really tongue-in-cheek and kind of a little bit of a joke, because I don't know, life's too short not to joke around. The secret is that you've done the work. By going through the workbook, you have put in a ton of work. You've gathered a lot of knowledge. You have thought deeply about your audience and kind of where you want to go with them. And so after you finish the workbook, you're going to move on to, as we said, the workbooks complement the message box. But what's beautiful is you have already brainstormed the pieces of the message box in a lot of ways. So when you crack that message box workbook or print out that fresh copy or start to fill it out online, you already have information that will inform all of these sections. Now, I don't want to suggest that you take the exact wording that you wrote in any one section of the workbook and just transfer it over. But things like for the problem section, referencing section 1, why are you communicating, is going to give you a really good sense of why are you communicating? What is the problem? What do you hope to achieve? And that will help you fill that in. Similarly, section 2, where remember we did the audience spiral, that's going to really help us understand what our audience's so what's are, so we can actively speak to them. So this is what I love about this is, as hard as the message box might feel for some folks, maybe a little daunting. I can fully respect that. A blank page of anything is daunting. You have already done so much of the thinking that has set you up to write these messages. And so that's the wonderful secret. It's not a secret anymore. I told you, but it's very satisfying to know that you have this, a lot of this work already done. So section 6 is really simple. We want you to draft a message box based on it. You do not have to combine the two. We think they're both really useful tools and they stand on their own, and that's wonderful. We think, though, that they are more than the sum of their parts, though. When you put them together, they are especially effective. And we really like how they work together. We've had really good luck having some test groups kind of work through these ideas before we formed the workbook. So with that, I am going to share like a couple of closing thoughts before we get to the Q&A section. I want to just talk about what else you could do with us, because I think that's really important. I clearly am a champion for all of this, probably because I deliver a lot of these workshops. It's the best part of my day. It's the best part of my job. I love doing this. This is why I show up to work, is engaging with folks like all of you. Although I have to say, talking at you for this long is not my favorite. I miss interacting with you. I miss having breakouts and discussions. So I'm glad we're moving to Q&A. This feels very weird to just talk for a while. But what I will say is Compass offers a lot of different ways to continue to learn. If you really liked this material and you want to bring something, a bigger version of it that's includes a lot more background and discussion and activities to your organization, that's great. We'd love to talk to you about it. We also have individual workshops. So if you're like, you know what, I think now's the time for me to check out that message box. I've been meaning to, but I haven't. We run quarterly, we run an intro to strategic communication workshop that really talks to you about the message box and strategic communication. What's great is that you have the email for Paula, for myself. We would love to talk to you about any of these things that come up. If you have ideas, thoughts, concerns, we would just love to talk to you about it. We are clearly really passionate about this work that we do. And we hope to cross paths with all of you in different ways as we move forward. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully I had a chance to get the QR code if you wanted it. If not, I'm sure we can drop links in the chat as well, so that you can get your hands on that website. All right, I'm going to stop the sharing and come back to the main screen. Hi, Paula.
Hi.
Ooh, that was a lot of talk. I tell you, so much talking. It is extremely rare that I ever do that. So thank you for hanging in there with me. The way we've kind of planned this, I think, is to have Paula is going to do some Q&A, some of the Q&A that's come in. She also has some questions of her own that she thinks that you might have. Yeah, so we're just going to have a little discussion until the end of our time. But please feel free. I would say the chat has a lot going on in it. So if you have a specific question, Paula, I think coming through the Q&A would be easiest. Is that right?
Yes, please. Yes.
Wonderful. All right.
Yeah, we did have one Q&A so far in the Q&A box from, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing, Jaylee Peer. Jaylee, if you'd like to unmute and ask the question out loud, feel free to. If not, I can read it for you as well. Give me a moment.
I'm This is
Bailey.
yay. I love having people read their questions out. Sorry, I just think it's great. Would love for you to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much. The presentation was amazing. I have been doing a lot of thinking about kind of crafting persuasive messages, especially from a conservation standpoint, because my background is rooted in conservation science.
Yeah.
And so if you're crafting persuasive messages that with the goal of influencing behavior, belief change, or a specific action in an audience, it often depends on what the values of the communicator is.
Mm.
So how do we, so like, for example, a conservation scientist may want people to value nature and biodiversity, but not everyone might. So what's the line of where might you be too manipulative in deciding what others should be doing or believing on an issue versus what's an appropriate nudge, and when is it okay to impart, your biased values on others' own beliefs and values? And then if you have any resources you might suggest.
Excellent question. I think about this so much. So I'm actually really thrilled that you asked it. I will think about additional resources. I don't have any off the top of my head, but man, we love a citation over here. So I will think about this after the fact. A couple of thoughts, though. The first is that I have a lot of feelings about the word persuasion or influencing, because I think those words come with a lot of connotation in like Western culture and a lot of negative connotation when it comes to the science and conservation world. Whether it's like you either feel like a used car salesman or like you're a social media influencer hawking whatever. But the reality is that's often not what we're doing, right? In many instances, we're saying we think it would be a great idea to make this change, and here's why. It is infrequent that we are really pushing things on folks in a way that's like, you have to do this, unless you are like in enforcement in a government agency. So I would keep that in mind, is influencing and persuasion are not dirty, bad things. They're just a reality of a lot of the communication that we do. So that being said, I feel strongly that you are not going to make people care about a value that they don't already care about. I'm taking that as a quote from Dr. Catherine Hayhoe. You do not need to instill new values in people to get them to care about the thing that you care about. I think what's most important, what she says is most important, I happen to concur, is that you connect with them on a value and make it clear how that shared value does connect to the thing you're talking about. And so maybe people don't really care about protection of nature and Western land conservation. Okay, that's fine, but maybe they have values around friends and family and cultural experiences out on the land, whether it's hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, whatever it is. Maybe they have a faith-based value around stewarding the earth for those who come after us. That could be a way to connect. It could be appealing to something like independence, like by taking some of these actions, it's going to help you stay independent and not have, you'll be able to retain your property, things will retain their value. You will still have assets here because you're going to steward this land well. Those are maybe some other ways to approach the conversation, because you're just really not going to change anyone's mind by being like, I know you don't care about nature, but I'm going to make you care about nature. It's going to be very hard if it works at all. Does that answer your question? I feel like there were a lot of pieces to it, so I want to make sure I touched on everything you wanted to touch on.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And just curious, like if people push back against persuasion and influence, do you have like another word you might like switch out for those?
Wow. There's a thesaurus full of words that I wish existed for words that we have at Compass. I don't have a word that I love right now, but I'm gonna say another thing, even though you haven't exactly asked this question. It really matters to me. When you walk into a persuasive situation where you want to change action, it is important to keep two things in mind as well. well, more than two, but these two are important to me. What is the power dynamic that you're walking into? What is the like historical, cultural dynamic? Is this someone who's overburdened by environmental injustice? You know, what is that situation that you're walking into? And can you be thoughtful about how you will look in this space, how you look, how you will sound, how you will come across? That is extremely important. And maybe you're not the right messenger, and maybe the thing you want to persuade on is not the right thing to persuade on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I feel strongly that if you want to persuade someone about anything, you have to be open to persuasion yourself. If you want someone to change, you also have to be willing to change. Finding common ground does not mean that like you stand on your ground and drag someone over to you, right? It's that you both kind of meet in a different place. And that openness to change, to understanding people's lived experiences and situations are going to really help you, because your persuasion will be more effective if it can adjust, if it can reflect their realities, and if it is co-built with them. It's going to be more durable. It will be really the kind of solutions that you're probably looking for. So thank you for allowing me to pull out that soapbox really quickly. I've been thinking a lot about that the past couple of weeks, and so I couldn't help but say that. So I hope that additional context may be helpful for you or for others in the room who may be thinking about this. Great. Are there any other questions in the Q&A, Paula, that we should look at, or should we?
Yeah, so I got a question in the private message. We also have a comment from an anonymous participant, and Mindy just raised her hand. So Mindy, why don't you go ahead and go first, if you'd like to unmute.
Sure, thank you. My question is about evaluation. And, there was a slide earlier about, what would the end result look like the box where you could sort of paint a picture. And you talked about sort of healthier, older citizens in the community. My question's around, how do you reasonably connect your communication and the actions that you took with an end result, that may or may not have been influenced by what you did, among many other things that might be happening in the environment? Just wondering about how you practice evaluation of your communication.
I mean, you are pointing out one of the trickiest parts of this kind of work. So I want to acknowledge, I should say this about a lot of things. I always say, I don't have any like magical answers, but I have ingredients and some ideas for recipes that you can put together to work for yourself. So I'm going to share some thoughts. Know that probably any one of these is not the right answer in isolation for you, and there are probably more right answers out there. I will first say that because I have learned this from the kind people that I have worked with, that evaluation is a social science, and a really great way to think about your evaluation is to work with a trained social science who knows how to do that, who knows how to run things like surveys, focus groups, all of those kinds of things. They are good at their jobs, very good at their jobs, and we are grateful for them. So I think it's definitely worth consulting them. And I also think that sometimes we can't be perfect, right? Like Paula just shared an evaluation in the chat, which we really appreciate you filling out. I do believe in evaluation karma, which means I always fill them out and then hope that people will then fill them out for me. It's important. We try our best, right? It can be really hard to separate maybe conflating, confounding factors, right? Where you're just not quite sure what's going on. And that's the reality of working with what I like to call the most complicated study species out there, human beings. So I would say you try, you do all the different things that are out there, not all the different things, again, money, time, resources. Think about how you can make connections. Maybe it's surveying people or getting evaluations because you can get them to fill it out. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's focus groups where you provide really good coffee and donuts so people want to show up and talk to you. Maybe it's, I was really thinking about seniors there / also myself. I will also say that if you want evaluation and it involves input from the human beings, you need to make sure that you are compensating them in any way that you can for their time and effort and reducing barriers for them to engage in it. That can look like a lot of different things, whether it's an in-person thing being held at different times of the day, having childcare, not assuming that everyone has a high-speed internet connection, if they're located in rural areas. These are all things that you probably actually most need to hear from the people who will have the hardest time engaging with these evaluation efforts. So please, please, please think about how do you bring those voices into what you're thinking about. I feel like maybe this isn't the most satisfying, but I really, truly like to draw the line of like what I'm most experienced in. And evaluation is not something I'm an expert in. And I luckily have a colleague who does evaluation with us. And so the answer actually is that I would consult Nicole because she's very good at it. And that's probably my best recommendation there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, so this is from an anonymous participant. You're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like to add anything to it, but it's more of a comment or a thought than a question, but I'll read it out loud. I think it's important to recognize not all communication needs to be actionable. Understanding how this fits into the broader communications would be helpful too. And then as well as the addition of a page on time, effort, funding. This is so not thought of about by most. I'm assuming that's referring to tactics and platforms. But if you have any comments or any response to that.
I will say, I'm going to take the last thing first. Thank you for the feedback. I think that's absolutely something that we can incorporate. And I feel like I'm the kind of person who says it so much that I forget that sometimes we need to write it down. And it really is every decision we make, right? Like, I don't think any one of us out here has just like this super well-funded communication program that's like out there doing anything they want to do and can do all the things and it's beautiful and wonderful. That's not our reality, unfortunately. So everything is a trade-off. And I would encourage you to bring that to your teams, whether you're comm staff, whether you are actively engaging with comm staff. I think this is a really important conversation to have. And it can really just start with, I know we can't do everything. What do we have the ability to do? And what's going to make the biggest difference? That's a really shortcut way to say that. So I would keep that in mind. I always encourage people to do things like that. When it comes to not all communication needs to be actionable, I would say that perhaps I view things in a different way, or I think about communication as like different pieces. I think that there's absolutely an aspect of communication that involves casual conversation, connection, understanding who your audience is, telling them a bit about you, where you're from, why you do the thing that you do. That's not specifically an action that you want them to take with it, but doing those things will help you build trust and understand what values you have in common and understand where they're coming from, what's their lived experience, why does this matter to them? And so if you frame communication as like all the things that come out of your mouth, or write on a piece of paper or all of that, then yeah, I agree. I don't think it all needs to be actionable in that way. I think there's an important part of just like community building that needs to happen. The workbook, I would say, really is tailored for those situations where you do want action to happen. And I bet you want the action to happen more often than you realize. I think that people are like, again, my goal is to inform. I will like drop this beautiful information off and walk away. And that's enough. And the reality is that is just not enough in almost any circumstance. And we would like to encourage you to think about the action that comes from that. So in that way, I will say, I think communication should be actionable. But of course, there are times when it's just about getting to know your audience.
All right. One final question, at least so far, and this comes up often, but do you need to do this work for each of the audiences you defined? And what if you're communicating with multiple audiences in one go?
Great question, Paula. Paula, I'm going to give you, I'm going to ask you to do a thing. There's a wonderful blog post about this, or at least related to this on the Compass blog, which Paula makes happen and is beautiful. And I'm very grateful to her. My brilliant colleague, Sarah Sanu, wrote a blog post about making decisions about audiences when you maybe have a lot of different audiences in a room, or how do you subdivide? And I think this blog post might actually really help you think through it. So I'm going to just put that there and say that. What I will also say is I think you need to be, the best way to decide that is to just be super thoughtful about your strategy. And because there is no right answer here. It could be that you need to explore a couple of different audiences at once. Maybe time is short. Maybe you only have funding for so long, or whatever it is. You have a couple of great opportunities to do communication. Maybe you have to do multiple audiences. If this is something that you've had to maybe convince someone within your organization that you should do, maybe you have to keep it small scale and do kind of like one audience at once. These are just kind of the realities of the guardrails that are around the work that we can do here. So I think the answer is, it depends. I know, the worst answer to get, but I think Sarah's post about multiple audiences and thinking about how to subdivide people or how to speak to multiple audiences will actually give you some information that will help you think about it differently. And yet again, thank goodness for the Compass blog, so that it can say things very eloquently when sometimes I feel like I can't. Well, Paula, if there are no more questions, can I close with an offering to everyone? I know you have a couple of closing thoughts you want to share. I am thrilled to chat with any of you. My email was on the last slide. You're going to get plenty of things with my email on it. If you would like to reach out to me individually, if you'd like to talk to Paula and myself, I'm happy to chat about things, whether it's sharing feedback, whether it's talking about something. We'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to do that, because I do value getting to talk to all of you and hearing about what's going on for you. And with that, I will pass it to Paula for I'm sure some very beautiful, eloquent closing words.
I don't know about eloquent, but I will share again the evaluation form. This is, I can't say it enough, it's super valuable for us to know if this was helpful to you, if this type of format is helpful, so that we can prioritize and our communication efforts too, and see what's really helping, and are we achieving what we hope to achieve. So if you can take 5 minutes of your day to fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. I'm also going to share the link to our events page, where you can see all of the other workshops or events that are coming up. We're adding more as they come. So you can sign up for our newsletter or follow us on social media if you want to stay up to date. But anything that is kind of open to the public will be on that page. And it was really wonderful to share this space with you all today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to see you all.